We're short 2 of these.
Oh,
well, I don't need one.
yeah, he got one already,
All right,
so.
so then I'll give this
Yeah.
to my colleague, and I'll take this.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We got settled here. 2-1, present actuarial, that's a hard one, assumptions selected by the retirement board. Jeff?
Yes, Your Honor, tonight we have Louise from Gable Rotor tonight. She did put this study together. The retirement board reviewed the information. This has to do with the pension costs and the funding. She provided 3 options, B3, C3. And I guess A, B2, B3, C2, C3. And all of these options, to the best of my knowledge, are approved by you and are very doable. The retirement board reviewed them, and it was the policy of the prior administration to be quite aggressive and to fund them early and quick. And this gives us the ability on these different columns to see what the total cost is to the city and the contributions of increase or decrease or savings or additional funds. I know I spoke to Ann, our new budget and finance director, as well as Carrie, and we felt that, we have to bring it, even though the board recommended the 6.5% and 2.75 inflation and 10-year amortization period. As you can see down the schedule, these all have different, we can't do the currents out, correct? Louise, that's really not.
We're comfortable with any of the options,
Okay.
but I think from a budget standpoint, probably it would be an undesirable option.
Sure.
I'll defer to him.
Sure. Undesirable. So, of course, if you ask me, B2 is best for the city. I guess I would say that if there was a compromise, it would be B3 or C2 would be more favorable than C3. But we'll leave that up to council, and we'll let Louise kind of present. I don't want to steal her thunder, but that's just an overview. So Louise, if you want to go through and explain how you kind of came up with those.
Sure.
You can come up here if you want.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Here, you can have mine.
That's fine, I can look at his.
Are you sure?
Yep.
You can have mine.
Appreciate it.
I just didn't feel like printing out 50 pages. Not when I got you right next to me.
Okay.
Sorry. One less one you have to worry
Yes.
about.
Louise, you can introduce yourself and your associate you brought with you tonight.
Sure. So my name is Louise Gates. It's nice to be here this evening. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm here with my associate, Mike Kashuk. We are actuaries. So exciting stuff, lots of numbers. We think it's fun, but we recognize that not everyone shares our enthusiasm for numbers. So we plan to keep it high level and, use layperson's terms to describe what's going on here.
Thank you.
Louise, how long have you been working on the Riverview account?
About 20 years. Over 20 years.
I just want to make sure that everyone knew that she's very familiar with our city.
I am.
Very
It's been a
good.
pleasure working with the board and from time to time with council. So I guess let me just start by saying that, as Jeff pointed out, we did an experience study. So let me take a step back. As actuaries, our job is to measure the liabilities of the pension fund. And in order to do that, we have to make assumptions about future events. That would include things like the incidence of death, because if you know the probability that someone's going to die at a given age, it also tells you the likelihood that they're going to live another year. And we use that to determine life expectancy. And that's important because it tells us how many benefit payments we expect the pension plan to make. And those things cost money, as you well know. Another important assumption that we make relates to the investment income of the pension plan. You The board retains professional advisors to help them invest the assets. And you need sufficient levels of investment income to pay the benefits that have been promised to the retirees of the plan. So those are two key assumptions. There are other assumptions as well, but given the fact that the plan has been closed for many years and the population is dwindling, those are probably the key assumptions. And so the purpose of the study is to review those assumptions periodically and to update them to better align them with anticipated future experience. But there's an additional reason as well. You are, as a city, you have a duty under state law to comply with what's called Public Act 202 of 2017, which creates a duty for the city to have an experience study conducted at least once every 5 years. Now, from my perspective, once every 5 years is enough. For a plan this size, you wouldn't need to have it done any more often. It just adds expense without adding value. Once every 5 years is enough. The last time we did a study was in 2017. So we prepared a study for the retirement board in December of 2022. And as I'm sure you know, there was considerable turnover at the city and there were some delays. And we met with the board ultimately in March to discuss the results of the study. And I'm not sure if everyone has a copy of the study, but
I believe we do.
In our
We do.
email, yeah.
I do. And let me pause here. We would be happy to discuss at a high level the findings of the study. So we did a study in December of 2022. We presented the results to the retirement board. The board asked for some additional scenarios related to the city contributions, as I think Jeff mentioned. That was covered in a supplement, which I think Jeff summarized at the start of the meeting. So if it pleases the council, we could just review at a high level some of what the study was about and what our findings were. Okay.
And it's right, we just ask questions as we go along.
Please.
Absolutely.
It'll make it more interesting.
Right.
And also to preference that, what percent is the fund currently funded? At what percent?
Oh, good
So
question.
we can start there.
Yeah, really. This was at 2021.
Okay.
It's probably dipped a little. Just over 90%. So that means for every dollar of pension plan liability, you have 90 cents in assets. And, you know, from our perspective, that's really good compared to your peer pension plans in the state of Michigan.
I was not expecting that higher number.
What page is it?
This is on, actually, the annual evaluation report. It's on page E-1. I can get you a copy of the most recent report.
I just was seeing if it was in what.
So if you go into the assumption study, page 10, that's not page 10 of the PDF, that's like numbered page 10. We don't actually have the percentage on there, but that first column A, if you take the item 2 divided by item 1, you can see, so, you know, 16.9 million in assets roughly, almost 20 million in accrued liability. Now that's for general. And then on the next page, we've got the police, again, same situation. So, you can see from
17.9.
Yeah, exactly. In that case, like the police division's almost 100% funded in that, as of that date.
But the plan overall is the key, at about 90% funded. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to talk at a high level about the December report, the first report that we issued, and our findings and recommendations.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you everybody for having us here. Again, my name is Mike Kostyuk. I've been with Gabriel Roger Smith for a little over 11 years and been working on the Riverview account for the entire time I've been with the company as well. So plenty of experience on my end with your plan over the years. So again, I apologize, I don't have the PDF, so if I'm talking page numbers, it's actually like the number at the corner of the page as opposed to the PDF number, so I do apologize for that. But I'm going to start on page 2. And I'm just going to go through again the findings of the report, the assumption study, and kind of give you some background on the various assumptions and the way we determine these things. So, the first one is mortality, and I'll try to keep this quick. I'm going to try to balance, not putting everybody to sleep, but also not talking too fast. But as Luis noted, the mortality assumption is basically, it's a table of probabilities of, the proportion of the population we think is good, that's expected to die at any given age based on studies of the population. And the flip side of that, as she noted, is that it also tells us how long we expect somebody to live. So for instance, the table might tell us that somebody who's 65 currently might be expected to live another 21 years. So knowing that from a plan perspective is important because we are making benefit payments to the members that need to be provided for with the funds. Or the city is, not we, but the city is making those payments. And if you think somebody's going to live 20 years and they live 25 years, you are now paying out more in benefit payments to that member than you expected. So it depends on hitting that target of what you're funding towards. Do you expect them to live 20 years or 25 years? Are you saving up enough to make that extra 5 years in payments if it's necessary? So making sure that the mortality assumption is up to date, accurate, and reflects the population being measured is extremely important. So the assumption that's currently being used in the plan is several years old. There are more up-to-date, the Society of Actuaries and various organizations are always coming up with new tables. And the most recent one is something called the Pub 10 table, or the Pub 2010 table. And that is the largest study ever done, mortality study ever performed on simply public sector employees. Usually they're either a cross-section of public and private, or just private sector employees only. So this set of tables is specifically public sector employees. It's sliced and diced 96 different ways. There's I believe 96 different tables, maybe it's 94, I can't remember exactly, but various subsections, various different types of populations. The three main are general employees, public safety, and teachers. Obviously, teachers is not something covered by this plan. We have general employees and public safety. And then that's further broken down into members who are healthy pre-retirement, before they retire, the probability of somebody passing away before they retire. Healthy post-retirement, which is the probability of somebody who is non-disabled passing away after retirement, and then also disabled tables for those members who take disability retirement. We're recommending moving away from the current assumption to this Pub 10 assumption. Again, to make sure that we're keeping up to date with this assumption, making sure that we're appropriately anticipating the life expectancies of the members in the plan, and making sure that we're essentially modeling the liabilities based on this most recent set of expectations. There is one other aspect that is kind of put into this that I'm not going to go into too much detail on, but something called generational mortality. If you ever hear that term, or if you see it in a report going forward when you're trying to fall asleep at night and you're reading through these things, generational mortality is simply the idea that somebody born now is expected to live longer than somebody born, say, 10 or 15 or 50 or 60 years ago, due to improvements in technology and medical expectations and whatnot. So over time, life expectancy is improving. These tables account for that by building that into the assumptions. So these tables generally anticipate lower mortality. So lower mortality means people are dying less, living longer. That is going to increase plan liabilities. Now, don't think of it necessarily as, oh no, we choose this assumption, it increases liabilities. We're really trying to make sure that we are modeling what is actually happening. So using an outdated table, anticipating people not living as long, that's the danger. We want to make sure that we are funding towards the benefits that are actually going to be paid, and making sure that we're using an updated table is an important way of doing that. So I'm not going to say too much more about that. If you go to page 3, that does show, could be interesting to look at some point, just life expectancies based on the current and then the proposed tables under various scenarios. Just shows the life expectancy of men and women at various ages based on those assumptions. Page 4, there's a couple other things that we reviewed in the report here. One was the amortization policy, and actually this is going to be very important. This is actually one of the main reasons we came back with the supplemental and showed the results at various other amortization periods. And Luce is going to talk about that more in a little bit. But currently, the general division is being amortized over 5 years as of the 2021 valuation. Police is over 10 years. And those are relatively short periods, especially with a plan that's approaching 100% funding, because what happens then is a plan might go over and then back under and over, and amortizing those differences, especially over a short period of time, can lead to unwanted volatility in the contribution requirements. So by pulling back, we're recommending, at least in this report, we're recommending 20 years, and doing that for both general and police. And that's going to do two things. It's going to lower the contribution requirement, because if you're imagining paying off a house in 5 years versus over 20, that's obviously going to have a smaller payment over a longer period of time. But the other thing it does is it kind of smooths it out. It makes it less likely that you're going to have these wild swings in the last few years of paying off the unfunded liability in the plan.
If I could just expand on Mike's
Yeah.
comments. So I think this was an idea, as Jeff pointed out, that your prior finance director had. He thought it was somehow tied to the lifespan of your landfill.
Right.
So the obligations of the plan as of, I think it was 2021, they would be financed, as Mike said, over a 5-year period for the general division employees and over 10 years for police. But what we call gains and losses, the difference between what was anticipated and what happened, would be amortized over straight 10-year periods going forward. But as Mike pointed out, the options that we came up with provide some flexibility because these obligations are debt. So when you lengthen the period of time that you're paying off debt, you're paying off smaller payments. We'll get to this in a moment, Jeff alluded to it. I think the board was more comfortable with compressing that payment period, which of course increases the annual cost.
Your Honor,
Yes.
part of the plan earlier was to, as the landfill closed, to have our money that we're putting into the pension system go away.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, the plan was, back then, was when she closes, we don't pay any more into the pension system, it handles itself. And that was basically what you were saying.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that would be true if the fund always earned 7% net of expenses.
Correct.
In perpetuity. But as we all know, our returns on our investments are never exactly what we think it's going to be, or these days what we hope it's going to be, exactly. And so what happens is, and that's part of the reason for the study, is to compare what was projected long-term to what happens each year. And to the extent that there's a difference, like a shortfall in investment income, it creates a new obligation.
Right, and when this was talked about last time, there was a lot of discussion, if you remember, Your Honor, on the fact of what percentage we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
You remember,
Yeah.
we had several members that were totally against going for 7, wanted to push it down to 5, 5.5.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
met with
Yeah,
the council at that
we know who
time.
that is. But there was a lot of argument over the 7, and in fact I was a bit uncomfortable with the 7 myself, but that's what was suggested at that time. So, to see that.
Yep. Thank you.
Just to, I know that this report had a proposal of various rates,
Yes.
like
Yes.
3 rates, maybe you could address that.
Yep.
And then the supplemental a variation on the theme, is that fair?
Correct.
Yeah, so this report, the current valuation assumption uses 7% as the investment return assumption. We also showed 6.75 and 6.5, both at 20-year amortization periods. And then the supplemental enhanced on that with the same 6.75 and 6.5, but also at 15 and 10-year amortizations.
Mike, do you want to talk just about the economic assumptions?
Yeah,
and
I could skip ahead to
how we
that,
got there?
absolutely. Okay, so, if you want to go to page 5, I'll go quickly through the wage and price inflation, then touch on the big one, which is the investment rate of return assumption. So, page 5 goes over the wage inflation assumption, and all this is simply it's price inflation plus the excess in salary increases anticipated by employees. We're recommending, based on the experience, and I won't go into too much detail here, but when we're talking about inflation, that's such a hyped up thing right now. And again, when we're talking actuarial evaluations, we're talking 15, 20, 30, 50 plus year time horizon. So looking at what's happened in the last 5 years or the last 6 months or what we think is going to happen in the next year is kind of something to caution against. We're recommending reducing that assumption currently at 3% to 2.75%, and that's based on the last 15 years roughly of wage increase experience in the city being roughly 1.8% on average, when the national average was closer to 2.9. So drawing that down based on a longer term horizon, and also if you look at the next page where we talk about the price inflation assumption, which is basically a building block of the wage inflation. It's a part of, we anticipate that if we have 3% inflation, we're going to see we're going to see wage inflation somewhere a little bit higher than that in general. Obviously, that doesn't always happen, but that's generally the hope and the expectation. So, again, right now, yes, we've been seeing, extraordinarily high levels of inflation, but going forward, the various metrics from the Social Security Trustees report, Federal Reserve Bank, we're looking at, long-term horizon inflation of still roughly somewhere between 2 and 3%, around 2.5% on average. So for this assumption, even though this one the price inflation isn't used explicitly in the valuation, but again, it's a component of those other assumptions that we make, we're recommending 2.5% for that, and that's in line with the long-term expectations right now. But again, that wage inflation piece then slightly higher than that at 2.75, slightly lower than the 3% assumption we had. That's going to basically reduce the level at which we expect pays to increase, which means that when we model somebody getting to retirement, their pay is going to be a little bit lower. We're anticipating a slightly smaller benefit that's going to reduce liabilities. But then moving on to the investment return assumption, that's the big one. And that's because it's this assumption, whatever we set it at, whatever the board and the council decide to set it at, is used to discount liabilities from the point which in the future which we think they're going to happen to present day. So if we assume there's going to be a benefit payment made 10 years from now, we discount it at that investment return assumption to present day to get the liability that we measure in the reports for that. Currently, that assumption's at 7%. What we do, and what we did in this study, was take a look at the system's target asset allocation,
It's shown on page
which is shown
7.
on page, yeah, thank you, 7, you said?
Page
Sorry, I
7.
covered it up here. And then, based on that allocation, so GRS, I just want to say, we're not an investment firm, and we don't provide investment advice. We don't, that's not what we do. We basically outsource this. We look at the expected returns of the portfolio using input from various national investment firms to come up with what would be a reasonable to expect return on the investments based on this allocation. As actuaries, though, go ahead. Were you going to, I'm sorry. As actuaries, we do have to comply with something called the Actuarial Standards of Practice, and there's an ASOP, as those are known, 27, that states that the investment return assumption can generally be reasonable. It's generally considered reasonable if it's between the geometric mean, which is the 50th percentile, and the arithmetic mean, which is usually slightly higher. So somewhere between that range. So based on this asset allocation, in using our 2021 set of assumptions from these investment consulting firms, we're seeing a return on average of somewhere between 4.99 and 5.67.
On page 8,
now-
if I could
Go ahead,
just-
yeah, absolutely,
Sorry.
absolutely. No, please.
On page 8 of your report, we have this chart that sort of shows the results of the analysis. And as Mike pointed out, we don't invest your assets, we don't provide advice on how to allocate them. That's done by PNC Bank. Page 8 shows the results of the analysis that was done. So basically, investment firms will give us their data, and we use that data in our model, as Mike pointed out, to determine long-term what these investment companies think your fund is going to generate in investment income. So on page 8, it's like the answer to the question, what do these 12 investment companies think a portfolio like the pension fund, shown on page 7, will generate on average in investment income over the next 10 years? And the next 10 years is pretty important. You're going to pay out about a third of all your obligations in the next 10 years. You'll pay out almost half of them within the next 15 years. So we have a model that projects benefit payments for the folks that are currently in your plan, people that are currently drawing pensions, people that are expected to draw pensions. If I just added up all the payments over 50 to 60 years, those payments would total over $100 million. You would pay out, the fund would pay out about a third of that in the next 10 years, and almost half of that in the next 15 years. So and you don't have $100 million held in trust. So you have to be able to generate, as a pension fund, sufficient levels of investment income to pay those benefits. That's really important. So on page 8, it's like the answer to the question, what would these 12 investment companies think your fund is going to earn on average over the next 10 years? And it's shown in the far right column on the top, the expected nominal return, 4 plus 5. That's one way of looking at it. So you can see there's quite a range here, from 7.11% down to 4.87%. There's some, that's a pretty big range. The standard deviation tells us how we expect that average to vary from one year to the next. I think, most of us have investments of some sort, and most of us have noticed, or I certainly have, that the markets are really volatile. So what this means is that your returns could vary to, 17.69% down to in the negative, 7% range. And what we've seen in the last 5 years is considerable volatility, not only in the returns of your portfolio, but of other pension funds as well. And at the bottom, it sort of organizes the information a little bit differently. You run thousands and thousands of trials, you get what's called a normal distribution, which is like a bell-shaped curve. And because you have so many trials, it gives you the probability of each of these events occurring. So on average, what this is telling us, just looking at the bottom chart, the average in blue at the bottom, is that you have a 50-50 chance of doing better than 4.99%. Looking at the returns for the current year, they're a little bit better, but we don't consider just 1 year in isolation, and try to take a look at what's happening over longer periods of time. So, the current return is 7%, and the probability of achieving that is shown in the far right corner. It's pretty low over the next 10 years. So, that's really the rationale for recommending a lower discount rate. That's the idea.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about that. I think that summed it up. Any questions on, either the mortality or the economic assumptions? Okay. Then I'll just quickly go through the results of this report, which start on page 9. So again, as we were saying, we've got the current assumptions were the 7% investment return, 3% wage inflation, and then as far as the demographic assumptions, that was the current mortality assumption. And then we provided 2 alternates, again, decreasing in each case, decreasing the return assumption by 25 basis points, using the wage inflation that we recommended of 2.75%, and then the updated mortality assumptions and whatnot. So page 10. Oh, okay. You can jump to page 12.
We split
Go ahead. Yep.
we split contributions out by general and police, but, in the interest of saving time and not boring you to tears, we're just going to show you like the impact on city contributions, which is probably what your main interest
that's
is.
the main
It
thing.
all comes from the same pot of money, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to flip to page 12, long story short, most of the assumptions that we are recommending do increase the liabilities. However, by extending the amortization period for general from 5 to 20 years, and then for police from 10 to 20 years, you are seeing actually a net reduction in the employer contribution requirement. And that's by stretching those payments on the unfunded part of the liability out over a longer period of time.
Now, I think it's worth pointing out that this report was prepared in December of 2022. And so we didn't have information at this time for your most recent fiscal year, which ended, as you know, June 30, 2023. We certainly don't have that yet. And we didn't have the financial results for the year ended June 30, 2022 either. So this shows you what the impact on city contributions would be on your 2023 budget, the year you're currently in. Now, for fiscal 2022, the investment markets were not so kind. The return on assets, I believe, was negative. And I have a chart here. It's a negative 12.76% net of expenses. And I'd have to say, pretty consistent with what we've seen for other pension funds for the same time period. 2022 is just not kind to investors. So the results, if this were adopted for your 23-24 budget, would not be quite as favorable. We'd have to do some work to figure out how favorable. We think there'd still be a favorable impact, but how much different would it be would take a little work for us to kind of hammer out. just a cautionary note.
You did see kind of a rebound though in 2023, correct? Are you seeing?
Yep.
Well, I am, at least, so what little I have.
Right, right.
Okay.
Not only down 30%.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sort of afraid to open up my
Yeah.
account balance. Right, so currently, just in terms of where things stand, the report that would determine the budget for your 23-24 budget year, it's sort of on hold pending decisions made by council. You know, given the turnover at the city and some delays in the board meetings, discussed this report on March 30th with the board. The board came up with the recommendation that Jeff mentioned to you.
And that was just last month,
Uh,
the final recommendation, correct, Gary?
It was actually on April,
Oh.
it was in June.
Okay.
June 19th.
Well, 2 months. I'm
It goes
sorry.
by fast.
It all goes together for me, yeah, I'm sorry.
It really does.
Yep.
It's been difficult to get a quorum, and I think the board chair resigned, so. So this is, as Mike pointed out, we show the anticipated city contributions using alternate interest rate assumptions and spread over a 20-year period. In your supplemental report, as requested by the board, we determined the impact using city contributions for then the 2023 budget year of using a different, shorter amortization periods, and that's shown on page 6 of your supplemental report.
And I think that was the one I referenced when I kind of kicked off. Because it was the board's recommendation of C3 is what they wanted to recommend to council.
Well,
That's the one that's least favorable to us.
There's a couple options. B2 is the most favorable to us, but B3 and C2, how you look at it, kind of split the difference.
But 6 forward, it's like another.
This is supplemental. I have it here if you guys need to see it.
No, we got it.
Okay, it needs the page.
While you're looking at that, if I may, the retirement board is charged with the obligation to accept or, select an option based on what is actually presented. They did request a supplemental, which you're now looking at, and they did approve C3, column C3 assumptions. This body can't choose one of the columns. It can only accept or reject what the board proposes. So to make this effective, you'd have to accept or reject that, the retirement board's option, and to make things work or move things along, it might be also appropriate to indicate what might be, if you reject this, to what might be something you would accept, to communicate that to the retirement board. I see Mr. Pease is here also, who's been acting chair of the retirement board, and he's come this evening so that he can hear this presentation as well, although Louise has presented this to the board on prior occasions and answered questions that were asked about it. So that sort of frames the legal responsibilities and duties and authority of this body versus the retirement board's independent authority, which they're fiduciaries, and so they have a duty to look to the interest of the plan, and the city has a duty to look to its own financial status and ability and the integrity of the fund.
so the board recommended C3. Is that what you're saying?
And as I kicked off and I said, asked Louise, is she in agreement with all of these? And she said yes. So from the Gabriel Roaders position, all of these fit within the formal guidelines of Gabriel Roaders.
we'd be comfortable with any of these options.
Jeff, bottom line, how do the numbers affect us?
Well, of course.
That's
as
what we
we're-
need to know.
As we just got out of a public safety assessment, how would you think that they would affect us? And, you know, the lesser would be better for us as a city right now. You know, assumptions change. Ann and I were speaking, assumptions change from year to year. A lot of things change from year to year, and they can be revisited on their next study or, I'm comfortable somewhere in the middle. I'm not, you know, C3 to me is, that's another, you know, in this presentation, another $82,000. But doing what we're currently doing is another $895,000 in the short time period, and, which is almost 3 mils. And being so highly funded, I'm comfortable there too. That's why
Can we go back to the funding?
yep.
There was two, general and police. General, is it funded at what?
They average out at 90.
From my perspective, it would probably be more helpful to just look at how the fund is funded in total, which was just over 90%.
And then police?
Well, so.
That's the average.
That's right, I understand that,
The
right.
statement says 88%, so it is very nice. For if I can say from Groseal's side, we were at 65%, the state reporters is 60%.
Right.
Our theory was assumptions change daily and pay what's required. I mean, that, I'm just coming from our side of it.
Right.
That the city will always be there. It's not like, I'm saying, like Jeff said, you just went in and said that the police are failing, that we need another millage, and now they're the biggest part of this. It's not the general fund, they're the biggest part of it. So, to me, he's being honest, saying, obviously you need funds, so to pay more into this, when you can decide down the road, you can always contribute more, as you watch from year to year, how your evaluation points. So, that's just my 2 cents after being here 2 weeks.
Good.
So, just giving you some advice, but,
We
appreciate it.
appreciate that.
yeah.
Louise, and the numbers, the savings or the expense, additional costs, those are projections, not specific dollar amounts, is that correct?
These would not be the dollar amounts for fiscal 23, 24. It's because of the timing of things. So this is what it would look like if it were adopted for the budget year that just ended.
Okay.
What are the trends? Confidence in
Yeah,
them?
generally. So speaking with Heather Hurd, and Ann could confirm this, Heather had indicated that she had budgeted $1 million for fiscal 23, 24. And that was just based on kind of a rough estimate of what we thought 2022 valuation, which since the contributions for 23, 24 would be. So you have $1 million carved out in your budget for a pension contribution to this fund.
But these numbers don't represent the total payment, they represent the difference which each choice would incur.
Well, actually, we have both, but again, it's like a year out of date, so, and I realize you're at a disadvantage, Carrie,
I have
because...
perfect recall of everything you say. I review it every evening, it's wonderful.
So, what's
Is there
your
a timer for
recommendation?
Well, I mean, I you know, I went through,
Oh, yeah,
I
no,
think, 3
supplemental?
retirement board meetings, and I've listened, and like I said, I'm comfortable with B3 or C2. I think C3 is a little bit over what may be needed when we need the funds today for police in general. And, you know, if we were at that 60% mark or 61% mark, that would be a different story, I believe. It's not that I'm kicking or suggesting to kick the can down the road at all. I'm not saying that at all, but right now, we've contributed, in this scale, we budgeted $1 million, and B3 is 834 in estimate, and C2 is 901 in or 801 in,
Yeah.
834 and 801, so it's slightly under what the budget was if Heather budgeted $1 million, so it's not like we're not funding it, we're just funding it a little bit less than that million.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just to expand on your comments, Jeff, for 23, 24, those are probably going to be a little bit bigger because of the
Yeah.
poor investment returns.
Sure.
But how much bigger, of course, depends on how you finance, the obligations.
But our choice isn't to pick, we either accept or,
Well, I think the first choice is, or the first action would have to be, if it's anything different than C3, you'd have to reject the retirement board's
Yeah,
suggestion. or-
if you're not comfortable with that, then you reject.
and then what happens?
Then it goes back to the retirement board, and the retirement board is advised, the council rejected that, and of course, the next question is, well, what would they approve, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
and I think that would probably be the discussion you'd have here, so that they aren't left guessing. If no action is taken, then you're kind of defaulting to your current situation, which is not
Yeah.
really actually, I don't know here, I'm outside my malpractice limits here, so, which may not be entirely actually sound due to market volatility. So, is that, do you like that?
Oh, gosh.
I got a degree in accounting from my dog from a university too, so. But that's sort of the procedure. Is that fair?
Again, we would be comfortable with any of the options, including the current, but, that's why we have a study session and why this is open for discussion.
I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. The retirement board is, that board made the decision, and normally we, back up boards when they make decisions. So, I mean, I struggle with second guessing all the homework that they did on it. I'm sure you got into much more detail with them than you did with us.
Yes, and I'm happy to go into any level of detail that you'd like, but I learned a long time ago, most people find actuarial work to be far less
And
interesting.
it's almost 9 o'clock.
Than we do, yes, and it's almost 9 o'clock.
This was our dinner.
Maybe yours.
Well, yeah.
Well, I'll just, solicit council, what's your opinion?
My opinion is, to go back to our city manager, what are you comfortable with?
And I think I stated either B3 or C2, at least for this point, right now.
And I support his opinion.
Dean?
Oh, come on, Dee. Don't be shy now.
I'm for C2. I don't want to insult the board, I really don't, but we have to make the numbers match.
Mm-hmm.
We're in unknown territory right now,
That's right.
that we're looking for what we're going to do. And if the city manager says that we can work within C2 for this year, we can always adjust it next year if we have to, but we've got, I'm more comfortable with C2 than B2, to be honest with you,
It was B3.
or B3.
C3?
No, he said B2,
B3 or
didn't he?
C2?
Correct, that's what I said.
B3.
B3 or C2?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with C2.
But that's not where, but this point is we reject the recommendation.
Well, if we're gonna let them know
Yeah.
where we're gonna go with it, I would go with them. But the problem is, and I agree with you, I rarely wanna go against the board that we put up. But we're in unknown territory right now, and we have to be a little more conservative with our finances. So hopefully you'll understand that, take that back. It's not an insult to them whatsoever in my feeling, but I'm just speaking for me.
So consensus is we reject it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Well-
C3 is just a little too close to what's been put aside, and that could go either way, right, if we were to adopt. So at least with C2 or B3, we had a little wiggle room.
Little more
Little
conservative.
fluctuation. Is it sound reasonable?
That's a
More
good
on the,
assessment.
like Dean said, it's more on a conservative type of approach.
Yeah. Yeah, we're, yeah.
Well, we
Any
need a
other
motion.
questions for the?
No, study session, I'm sorry.
Just-
I'm sorry.
Must be
That's all right,
nine.
It must be 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
I got your
I was like,
8:30.
wait
I'm
a
sorry.
second.
Yes.
But just for clarification,
Go
you
ahead.
rejected C3 and you're recommending C2?
Or,
Are you, how are you?
You
gonna
pretty much
transmit-
know we're looking at C2.
Yeah, how are you
we
going to
can't.
transmit that back to the board?
Or a
We just
We
did.
are right now. We are right now.
The treasurer can advise the board, or the city manager in writing if that's.
Ann is the new seat on that committee, so you'll be working with Ann. And I'll be happy to go to the first meeting with Ann, the next meeting with Ann.
Please let them know we're not.
Oh, yeah.
Deficit elimination
So
plan
we
is
wear a
rough.
fiduciary hat. You guys wear a different hat.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for
Thank you so
your
much.
report.
Yes, thank you, Louise.
Pleasure.
Louise, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Plant Moran asked us in a meeting, for this pre-audit meeting, that we have to have this evaluation done every 5 years. Is that going to be complete? Are we making our, did we make our time frame?
You absolutely did.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You are.
That's one of my,
compliant.
I'm working for that unqualified opinion, so that's one of my check boxes that I've got for my audit, right? Because I'm learning as I'm going, so
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that that box has been checked off, because there was a few other asks in the pre-meeting, and that one was a big one, and there was a couple other big ones that I already checked off, so
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable. I'll sleep tonight, how about that?
Yes, you're fully compliant.
I doubt
it.
But now that you've mentioned the audit, Jeff, so I think Ann indicated that
Yeah, we'll
the
start.
auditors would start probably in October.
Correct, first week of October is the
Okay.
date.
So in terms of the timing of things, we would anticipate that the new assumptions would apply to the 2022 report, which is fiscal 23-24.
Okay,
So in order for us to give them the accounting numbers that they need, we have to complete the 2022 report.
how long will that take you after the board or whatever council makes a recommendation? How long would that take you?
It shouldn't take too long.
Before-
It's going to depend on when the board.
Yeah, well, we're gonna meet at the end of the month,
Uh,
and then we'll bring it back.
End of September?
No, end of August. Don't we have an August?
Typical meetings.
Yep,
August.
fourth Tuesday.
Or Tuesday? Okay.
Yep. So we would meet then, and then bring it back to you, whatever the recommendation and council adopts.
Okay,
And the auditors would definitely need it before Thanksgiving.
oh, absolutely, but.
Okay.
So just so I understand the sequence of events, council has just rejected the board's proposal,
Yep.
but leaning in favor of C2, and Bruce is here and can communicate that to the board. If the board adopts C2, are we done? Or does it have to go back to council?
They have to.
Ratify it.
It has to be approved formally,
Mhm.
okay.
Which would be the first meeting in September.
In September. But we could probably,
Yeah.
with that in mind, start working.
Yeah, we
knowing-
wouldn't need it at another budget or study session.
No,
just,
you know, it would just be council resolution at that point,
Okay.
the 5th, September 5th.
Okay, so that should give us enough time then to have the report complete. So be
Perfect.
able- But there's one other thing, and
Yeah.
that's the retiree health plan. I think, given the turnover in staff, Carol leaving, we need some information to do our work to measure the liabilities of the retiree health plan.
Tracy's on staff. I'm sure she'll introduce herself to you tonight. She's here.
Oh, wonderful.
And Tracy is
Tracy is-
wonderful. She's
Work
made
together.
great strides on a lot of things in that office already, so I'm sure she'll be able to work with you and get you what you need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm,
We want to make sure you have what you need for your audit.
sure. Me too.
We know how difficult it can be.
Yep, me too. I wanna have a good audit, so.
You will. Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you guys like doing this stuff.
If you ask them, they'll do a second
Well,
supplemental.
thank you.
No.
It's okay, Carrie.
Numerous footnotes.
Yes.
Nice to have you right here, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, special projects, Jeff.
Kevin, what, you want to talk about Tetra Tech special projects, just in what's going on at the landfill? and-
We're expanding on that gas project a little bit. As of late, we're hoping that it's on September, end of September, that will provide more flow to the RNG facility, which is looking to commission.
You guys don't have to stay if you don't want.
September,
But see,
October
Teresa-
timeframe.
That's
Drive
big,
safely,
All right.
blood watch.
Yeah. And hopeful start date, the first week for the RNG facility to be up and running. So the gas project obviously helps the RNG facility. Those are the biggest projects that we have going on currently.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks. All right, so Ohio.
Okay, we're closing lots of projects. The sewer lining project is almost done. We are starting next phase shortly. The fueling station at the DPW is done. The John Cena program will be starting soon. And the street sectioning program just started, so that will be ongoing for a while.
Where are they at now with the streets? Where are we
They started
starting?
On Hamilton,
Hamilton?
yes.
Okay.
Are they doing the cities by section? Because we got an email today, I think I forwarded you, Jeff, somebody sent me a picture of some streets really bad in front of his mom's house, and somebody on the other side of 4th Street. And I mean, we have all the sections picked out already.
All
I'm
the sections
assuming.
are picked out. I have pictures of every section that gets done. And yes, we get, once it starts, we get a lot of
And that's what-
people calling,
yeah.
wanting to know why theirs isn't done, and they always think that theirs is
Worse than.
The
the
worst.
worst.
Oh, yeah.
So-
That's why I sent it to you.
Yeah,
Jeff, does it
Pick.
ever make sense to post on our website someday the Pazer study, which is our road study, which puts out there which are in highest demand of repair? So they could ever look at that? Well, we'll talk about that
I
later.
believe it's on the website.
Yeah.
It's available, but again, generate all kind of complaints and issues.
Well, at the bottom, we put your name and cell phone number.
Sorry, so Hal, go ahead.
The other ones, site plan reviews that we're doing over for every plan that comes in, just send comments back for speeding the process. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Hal, one last question, because I've been asked about it, the boat ramp. Is it still up for,
It is up, the question came in from the contractor this morning about what they would like it done, except on weekends. So we're gonna pick either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, because we have to shut it down completely.
yes.
But I
So,
don't know what week yet.
okay, so when you do that though, can you inform Mary in my office, or so we
Sure.
can get it posted everywhere,
Sure.
Facebook, the
Website.
website, everything, so that we know when it's down, so that the calls won't come,
The city channel.
the city channel,
Cable.
city channel,
That
yeah.
you can't read.
Yeah.
Well, right now it's
Town
busted.
crier.
Right now, the city channel's busted for some reason.
Okay.
It's getting fixed. We got an apparatus that's down that Ken had to order, so.
I was not
I
aware of
forgot
that.
to mention that to you tonight, I'm sorry.
Well,
I
I'm
just
surprised
found
none
out.
of us got a text message
Okay.
saying.
No, you
I
can
did.
watch it live.
I didn't check my
You can
text.
watch it live, I guess?
Yes.
You can't tape it. and-
Correct.
For right now.
They were what, yes. YouTube is okay, but the cable channel's out?
Gosh, you guys are, I think.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
That's
anybody
fine,
else?
it's out there somewhere.
I want Mark Kibbe to spend all night here.
Yeah. Well, now we're to Dave Skirdo,
All right.
and then we can lead into Mark Kibbe, so that's good.
We've been working with Paramount on the next expansion, trying to understand what they want to do and what they're looking for from the city. Also, we have 2 more cannabis operations getting ready to go to planning commission approval.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
ask which one?
Which ones are the two? Was it Loom and somebody
One
else?
is where the old Denny's restaurant used to be next to the mobile station.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is in one of those vacant properties right on King Road, kind of west of Atria, King Haven.
All right. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. When the old Denny's location was going to be a Dunkin' Donuts,
How did we lose that?
we had a back and forth with the entrance of leading into Concessi's.
Yep.
How is that going to affect the old Denny's location for a cannabis?
They, right now, Concessi said no way is anybody gonna access their property, so they're gonna have to, we looked at the site plan today, we sent back comments. They showed going out there, it said you either have to get Concessi's to
It's
get
not
an
gonna
agreement, or
happen.
you else have to punch out to 4th Street with a new drive.
But they could have done that with the Dunkin' Donuts
They
also.
could've done that with Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it was a cost thing that there would consider.
Here's a time thing, the state has a cost.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I
I'm
believe.
sure everybody has anything to say before we call Mark up here. All right, Mark.
Well, you gotta read this too, right?
Hour and a half presentation.
Sorry. We deserve it.
Well, the best thing is, Mark is really dedicated, because he was off today, so.
I left early.
So, you know what, he came here under, so anyhow.
So Mark's here to help us out. I got an email from Wayne County, want to know if we're interested in having our participation in the CDGB program renewed. Looks like it's some type of 3-year automatic renewing type thing, but I just thought it best that we, bring it before council first to discuss. We want to do this. And the reason is, it'll automatically renew this Thursday if we take some action. So, Mark's here to convince us it would not be a smart thing to do to opt out at this point, so go ahead, Mark.
So just real brief, because I know some new faces here, I apologize, I haven't seen you in such a long time, because unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of good news coming from Wayne County other than our allocation. So the way the Black Grant program works now is we get an allocation of $20,000 per year, which we use for public services. Todd Dickman and Donna Mitchell's time goes applied to that for senior services. The way the program changed about 5 years ago was within that time frame, you were guaranteed one $100,000 project. We've put the applications in, we've gotten denied, put them in, denied, put them in, denied. Possibly some good news coming out, and I don't want to get to that just yet.
Correct.
The way the program works with Wayne County is we're part of the Urban County Cooperative Group. So all of our funding goes through Wayne County. Lincoln Park, Taylor, Livonia, Canton are all entitlement communities. They get money directly and they deal with HUD directly. Since we're smaller communities, we work right with Wayne County. We've been doing this since 1975, 76, somewhere in that range. So they're asking for a re-up again for another 3 years, program years 24, 25, 26, which start July 1 of each of those years. They ask in a very strange way, because they've sent out a letter to the mayor, to all the mayors, that if you don't respond within a week in a negative sense, then you're automatically in. I did reach out to them on Friday night. I didn't hear anything back, because we did this 3 years ago, only to come to find out they needed approval from the council after all as well. So it is not in your best interest to opt out. The program is working well with $20,000. Can I go ahead and
Go right ahead,
okay.
please.
So potentially you have some really good news coming out. They've gone through a public hearing down in Wayne County. They're waiting for the for HUD approval, and then they'll take it to the Wayne County Commission for approval. But it looks like the Freeland Park project was approved for $320,000.
So just remind us what it's
It's going to be new to increase the
Additional
size of the
pickleballs.
pickleball courts, adding in a water fountain, adding in some porta-john, but in a more of a permanent setting, porta-johns, and replacing the park pavilion, park picnic shelter. So $320,000.
Good news for
Yeah,
that
so
area.
that was some good
That's
news.
great
So
news.
Not anything official yet, but it's looking pretty good.
Can any of that money for Freeland Park be used on any of the other parks?
It is not, that is strictly for that park.
Yeah, it goes by area, correct?
Yeah, that is one of the few areas that's still qualified. The city has just a couple areas. For the longest part, there was a section that included part of the golf course, and what's the houses off of Grange? There's some really high-end houses.
Oh, yeah,
Coldview,
yeah.
Super Sub over there.
Not even the super sub, it was like a strip of like 8 houses. They qualified, I don't know how, but it was just how
Yeah.
they work. So this is just the Breland Park area. There's a very limited on what they do allow, but that's it. And that's unfortunate, because the program did change, and Councilwoman Blanchett, you remember, we used to get just short about between 80 to 100,000 we could use on all the parks. So we were doing a lot of work in the parks as time went through. So as I put there, if I would not opt out at all. I would stay in, especially knowing you have 320,000 reasons to stick around now. But the program does work pretty well in the long run. It's just frustrating that it's taken this long to get a project approved.
And you sense my frustration in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
How
I
much
have the
is our
same.
annual agent participation?
No, yeah, it's just, that's how they divide. We used to get the 20,000 directly, and then, like I said, 5 years ago, Wayne County intervened and
Yeah, so we would get 80,000.
We'll leave it there.
We'd get
We'll
between
leave
80.
it there.
Yeah.
We get between 80 to 100, and we could divvy it up amongst the different projects we're looking for. So we've done park projects, we've done street improvements, senior services, activities like that. Wayne County was inundated with so many projects. If you have, I believe there's 34 communities in the consortium. If each of them had 5 projects, you're talking 170 projects, right? And right now, they're down to, the 34 communities can have $20,000, and then they pick about another 6 to 8 projects. So you can see how that condensed their workload significantly.
I'm just happy we're getting.
And they got the administration people doing that.
Of course.
They took on a lot of, surprisingly, they took on a lot of administration money from the program.
I'm stunned.
And I know, I was shocked as well.
Yeah, my
So,
gosh.
I would ask if the council, mayor and council would consider, I would still pass a resolution if you want to put that on the agenda for the next meeting or not.
So just reinforce it,
Just to
obviously, okay,
reinforce it,
right.
yeah. I think it always helps that, county knows that you're on board. I don't like the way they ask the question. It's really odd. As I said, a couple of years ago, they actually came back to us and said, hey, we actually need a council resolution now. So I'm like,
Okay, we're used to oddly worded things floating around.
it's Wayne County.
So we'll make sure it's on the next meeting, next Monday.
Yeah, that's
And then
what
we'll
it-
send you the clerks.
So it's a little, like I said, it's a little odd, and the way I wrote it up is a little odd, because it's like, you're asking for this, for council to approve something after the fact has already been done, but just kind of, just to clean up, keep the file clean.
Thank you for coming and straightening
I
us
got
out.
2 more hours of presentation I can talk about.
Yep, that's good, thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark, we
Can I
appreciate
just
it.
ask one quick question? What, I'm a little new to this in particular. What, like, how are the certain areas selected? Or like, what are the qualifications and why have we been sort of, up until now, it's been a gap?
Yeah, so
Is there a certain thing we can work on?
And
or-
I can send over a map that, us and Jeff a map that we distribute back to mayor and council to show the qualified areas. So it's based on a low to moderate income area. So that threshold is 51% or higher has to be low mod to qualify. So the area around Vreeland Park now, and when I'm talking Vreeland Park, I'm talking Vreeland Park west of Quarry, not east. It's been on the east side many years ago, now it's on the west side. Memorial Park was one that was qualified as well. That is not qualified this time. And it goes by, it used to be by census numbers. Now they use the American survey, so that's what they factor portions into. The other area that I know qualifies is the apartments on Fort Street.
The Huntington Apartments.
Is that Huntington? There used to be the green, it's right on Fort Street, and it just kind of follows the backyards of those houses.
Oh, green trees.
Well, maybe green trees,
Oh,
yeah.
It was green trees.
Yeah,
Over by the forest.
I think there's
And
sections
then
in there.
the area here, there's the apartment complex on Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That area
Crossings.
qualified, the area
Cross
that
River
we,
Crossing.
the area that we lost the park to the fire
Yeah.
many
Twice,
years ago.
yeah.
I've asked to put equipment in there many times and I've been shot down, so I understand it. But that area qualified, so we had a number of areas that did qualify. But it's based on those numbers, and then Wayne County sends out a map of qualified areas through HUD.
Okay, so
But I think,
income-based.
and that's
It's all income-based.
Yeah, Dave, that's a great point, because we get tons of criticism that we never get grants for this, we don't get grants for that. It's because
We
of
don't
where
get
we
it.
are, and,
Yeah.
you know, we.
I
we-
can
it's
tell
just
you
not-
how many grants I send or look
Yeah.
into, and we do not qualify either based on the homogeneous population that we have, based on race, based on home equity, based on home incomes. There's so many factors, and we unfortunately fortunately, don't meet
It's
the,
easier,
yeah.
So the
So-
park that's on Jefferson, between Jefferson and Riverview Street,
Uh-huh.
qualified at one time. That area does not qualify now.
Wow.
Really? I don't, and it could be, honestly, it could be the lack of response as well. They just don't have enough response. When I was at the city of Melvindale, I had hair, a little bit of hair at that time, many years ago. We tried to do a door-to-door survey, and to try to get an area qualified, it's very, very difficult. You know, so, but it kind of goes in cycles.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right,
Drive
Mark,
safe.
drive safe. Tell our
Okay.
friends in Allen Park we said hello.
Any other business council wants to bring up?
No, sir.
Oh, and it's time for public comment. Anybody want to stick around a little while longer? Okay, everybody go home.